Hey everybody, hope things are going well with you and that things are cool in your world. So in addition to people asking me about how did I get involved with working with GG Allin, I also get that same question about, how I got involved in working with Tiny Tim. I mean, these are two of the most unique individuals, I think, in music, arguably. Um, uh, Working with Tiny was really super interesting, and it's amazing. And I'll probably do an episode about this. It's amazing how much Gigi and Tiny Tim were similar. And I don't know if that's just because you have some very eclectic personalities, and they all do you know have their own idiosyncrasies and whatnot, but yeah, they were they were they were almost like two peas in a pod. It was one of my biggest regrets was not being able to get those two together in the studio. Unfortunately, by the time I started working with Tiny Tim, Gigi had already passed, so there was no chance of that. But Gigi was a big fan of Tiny's music. He used to go see him in Spooky World all the time. And if you're a Gigi fan, I'm sure you've seen that picture of those two together from back in the day. I think that was taken in the mid 80s. I also released a little EP called Two American Legends, and it's a split EP of work I did with both Gigi and Tiny. And in addition, there's a release coming out. I hope to have it out very soon, certainly digitally, but it's kind of expansion on that Two American Legends EP. It's called Beautifully Ugly, and it's going to be up on all the streaming services, hopefully in a week or two, but more on that when it comes out. Anyways, so how I got to working with Tiny Tim, was one day Joe Coughlin, who was writing a book about GG Allin, was interviewing me for his book. And, the interview ended, and I just happened to ask him. I said, "Hey, what do you got going on tonight?" And he's like, "Well, I'm going to go see Tiny Tim. He's playing at Spooky World." And I said that was a little festival, a little Halloween festival that was done in the New England area. I don't know if they still do it or not. But anyways, so I said, "Wow, Tiny Tim, man, I haven't heard that name for decades." And I remember when I was a kid and Tiny would be on Laugh-In and, The Wedding on Johnny Carson and Dick Cavett and Tiny was everywhere when I was a kid. And I always used to see him on TV and think, wow, what a strange and unique individual this guy is. I admittedly wasn't really into his music until much later, but as a kid, in the early 70s, seeing this stuff seeing Tiny was pretty funny. Anyways, so Joe tells me he's playing at Spooky World, and just off the cuff, I said, "Man, that's a guy I'd love to do a project with." And Joe says, "Well, I'm best friends with somebody that Tiny is super close to, and I can maybe inquire about that if you want." And I said, "Sure, what the heck?" A lot of this time when you say stuff like that, nothing ever materializes. So I just thought of it as just another off-the-cuff comment that nothing would ever happen. Well, about a week and a half later, it was in the middle of the afternoon, and for some reason I wasn't working at that point. I was off work or whatever, and I get a phone call. I pick it up, and it's it's Tiny, and he's in his very typical Tiny Tim delivery, was saying, "Hey, Mr. Robinson, this is Tiny Tim, and I hear you would like to do a recording project with me." And I was a little blown away, just because, again, I used to watch this guy all the time when I was a kid, and here I am all of a sudden on the phone with him talking about a recording project. So I said, yeah, I'd love to do that. And, we just kind of exchanged pleasantries and kind of got to know each other, and we're feeling each other out a little bit, and, seeing it was just one of those cold calls. So we had to chat a little bit before we started talking about the project. Well, as we're going along, and maybe this was a phone call at another time, if I remember right, I think, we both needed a little time to think about what this project might be. Because here's the thing, like GG Allin, I didn't want to do just a project of, some more ukulele songs, that Tiny did. There was hundreds of those things out there. I mean, I wanted to do something completely like GG. I wanted to take him out of his comfort zone and, let him make an album that his other record companies either refused or wouldn't let him do it. I said, listen, you tell me what you want to do. So we start chatting again, and he calls me, and and again, this is, learning how to deal with Tiny. It was very much like learning how to deal with GG Allin. There's minefields and stuff you had to avoid and whatever. So we're talking, and he says, well, what I want to do is I want to put out an Edison Cylinder. And I just was, kind of perplexed. And I said, Tiny, that is a really cool idea. And it turns out that Justin Martell, who wrote the Tiny book, took that and ran with it and released a cylinder. But for this particular thing, we didn't, I told him, I said, look, man, I just don't think Edison cylinders would be a, something that we can market and sell very well. Maybe one or two of them, but that's about it. Or, you know what I mean, a small handful of them. So then he goes, okay, I understand. Well, my other thought was I want to do something with the Notre Dame marching band. And I just kind of, again, stunned. And I said, Tiny, cool idea, but I don't have the juice to get on the horn with the athletic director at Notre Dame and ask if we could use the live band for a session to record with you. I just don't see that happening. It's a little unrealistic. So what else are you thinking about? And then he has this idea. He's like, well, he's always been a big fan of crooning music, and anybody that's a fan of Tiny knows this. He loved, Rudy Valley and Bing Crosby and, crooners of that nature. And he says to me, my favorite crooner is a guy named Russ Columbo, and I would love to make a tribute record to him. I said, okay, now we're on to something. Now we're talking, So I didn't know anything about this genre of music when I first started working with Tiny. He kind of turned me on to a lot of this stuff, and he guided me to Colony Records in New York City, and I called them, and I got them to send a bunch of Russ Columbo records to actually Paul Reller, who produced and worked on the GG record. Paul was so instrumental in this Tiny Tim album, just like he was with the GG thing, but he scored it, he conducted it, he did all the research and the work behind it. He established the musicians. He got the recording company, Bass Sound Recordings, Dan Smith's great company, and we brought this all in. We recorded Prisoner of Love. It was all done live. We did 2 songs a night for 5 nights, total of 10 songs. It was very challenging because it was done live on a soundstage, because we wanted to keep the integrity of those songs when they were initially recorded. So we thought that, doing them live would be so much better than just doing them in a studio. And that had its own challenges because of, when you got 13 people or whatever on every night, and then Tiny, his voice wasn't what it used to be. So, there was, we'd have to do a take, listen to it, redo a take. So these took a long time to do. It was very challenging on a lot of levels to get these done. But we ended up doing it. But it wasn't without some consternation. I was vacationing in North Carolina, went down to the Outer Banks, and we were just setting this thing in motion, so to speak. I was putting Tiny and Paul together, and they were having their conversations. And again, this is before we recorded all. I jumped a little ahead of myself, but I get a phone call in North Carolina from Tiny, and he says, it's not going to work. This this can't happen. It's just not gonna work. Me and Mr. Reller are we can't seem to come together and on getting the same mind wave and get this thing together. And I said, whoa, what's wrong? And he told me they had some. I guess a little headbutting or whatever. And he says, but what I want to do is I got a bunch of songs I want to do instead of the Columbo thing. We'll do Reunited by Peaches and Herb. And he had all these kind of, I don't want to say lame songs, but songs I really wasn't really interested in recording with him because it was more of the same. Tiny, again, he's got hundreds of songs where he's doing cover songs of whether it's Great Balls of Fire or AC/DC or I just wasn't interested in that. I wanted to do something that was a little more unique. So I'm sitting there. Then I hung up the phone with Tiny and got on the phone with Paul. And we're going back and forth, and I patched things up together with those guys. And all things went in motion, and I went back to from North Carolina back to actually I was living in Columbus at this point, but we recorded everything in Florida, so in Tampa, ironically in the same place where the GG album was recorded. A lot of the same people were playing on that Tiny Tim album as the GG Allin album. So anyways, we got him down there, and like I said, we did 2 songs a night for 5 nights, and it had its challenges. And you've probably seen some of the footage where I have Tiny in the park. During the day, I would take Tiny and we would go into the parks, different parks, and I'd get him. He'd drink a little Schlitz quarts. We found these quarts of Schlitz on sale, and he bought a bunch of them, and we'd go into the park, and he'd just sit there and drink Schlitz and play on his ukulele, and just sang songs and talked, and you could see a lot of those on the channel, and I'm going to be posting more of that sort of content as time goes on here, but. So we did that during the day, and then I'd go back, drop him off at the hotel, he'd freshen up, and then I'd come back, pick him up, and then we'd do songs in the evening. Like I said, we did 2 songs a night for 5 nights, total of 10 songs. And, so that kind of was how I got to working with Tiny Tim. It just kind of organically evolved, and Tiny and I, up until his unfortunate passing, we were in touch nonstop all the time. We talked on the phone all the time. He would call me up at night, and he would play his ukulele and sing songs, and he'd sing like the songs on Prisoner. He'd sing to me where like he'd sing, okay, this is how Bing Crosby would have sung it, and this is how Mr. Valley would have sung it, and then he would do, and here's how Russ Columbo would sing it. So he was educating me on their vocal styles, and which he was a huge fan of Russ Columbo, and that's how those recordings came about. And I was really stoked that we were able to get those done, because there was a couple times I didn't think, it got to be real late in the evening, and just didn't think, this song might not have been able to finish it, or that one, or whatever, but we were able to get them all done, and everybody was just awesome to work with, all the musicians, Dan Smith at bass sound, Paul was amazing, Andy Irvine, who played bass on the GG record, he played on the Tiny record. I mean, it was just an absolute spectacular effort by everyone, and it's one of those things where you just kind of go, man, the universe really wanted this album to happen and these recordings to happen, because it was precarious at some points. So anyways, more on that as more on these Tiny Tim sessions, and some of the videos of him in the park. I'll be posting more of those as we go, and also check out the channel for original GG Allin content, Tiny Tim content, unreleased footage and video of both of those guys. Some of the other guys I'll be talking about, working with was, as time rolls on, was, I tried to do a project with Abdullah the Butcher, and I did a project with Sleepy the Beef, and worked with Dwayne Peters, and Bloody Mess and Double Truckers out of Florida, and the skate punk band. So lots going on. Anyways, if you guys check out the channel for more content, if you can subscribe and like and comment. I love hearing you guys' comments on anything. GG Allin, Tiny Tim, all of it. Shoot me a comment down below. I really appreciate it. Also, check me out on check the label out on Instagram. I put up a lot of unreleased photos and whatnot of both of these guys. So, anyways, hope you guys have a great day, and thanks so much for listening to this. Appreciate it.